So welcome everyone. Great to have you all here for our second day of the Immersive Reality Boot Camp. And today we're featuring an expert panel. So we've got quite a number of presenters, discussants today, which is fantastic. And if you're seeing my shared screen, you'll be able to see their names. So we've got Stuart Barber, Ben Loveridge, Charles Sigvini. And I keep on pronouncing his name wrong, and he's probably going to laugh at me anyway. Meredith Hinds, Mitch Buzzer, love that name, Mitch. Alexis Pang, Stephen. Stephen's actually had to just drop out. He's actually a paramedic, and he's had an emergency call, so he may or may not pop back in. And Todd Stretton, all the way from New Zealand as well. So thank you all. It's great to have you on board, and you've all got fantastic experience in different contexts of using immersive reality in education. And what I'd like to do today is just really find out some of what your experience is, what you've been involved in. So we'll just go through in that order that I've got on the screen there. Give us a short intro to what your experience is in immersive reality in education, perhaps what you see as some of the key issues, and then we'll open up to question and answers and see if we can get some discussion going. So there is a bit of an intro to people. I've got a link to their profiles here on this page. I'll just put that link into the chat so people can see this page if they haven't got the link. And also on our SOTEL Research Network page, you can see some of the intro blog posts from people there. So welcome to our illustrious panel. Let's start off with Stuart, and I'll stop screen sharing and hand it over. Sorry, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'll try and start screen sharing, fingers crossed. And I'll just put my PowerPoint up once I can sort out my multiple screens here. Bear with me for one second.
It's working. That's good.
Okay, hopefully you can see a super messy screen there right in front of you now. So I guess, oops, let me just go back up, sorry. So I guess my journey within what began as, I guess, more virtual reality rather than augmented, began when we had issues trying to get students to understand a whole lot of things about farms, because there's been a lot less students coming into both ag and vet courses from farming backgrounds. So we're looking for a way to get students to still have that experiential learning, even though we knew we couldn't always take them out to properties. And so chemical engineering and David Shellcross and others had developed, I guess, an early stage 360 walkthrough design. And so we took that design and then made it viewable both on Android and Apple devices. So one of the early problems was it was going to cost, I think, about $250,000 to make it visible on both, which was obviously fairly excessive. But with the advent of HTML5 and WebGL, that got rid of a range of those problems. So we were able to make that viewable on any kind of device. And that also, our development of the 4D farms, which are 360 images through time and the same place. So you can see on the bottom right of screen there, some cattle yards and some of the different images that you can jump around on the farm. So that was our first, I guess, foray into VR towards the end of that project. So that was an Office of Learning and Teaching funded project. The Oculus development kits came out. And so we started looking at that and thinking for the future how that might look in those higher end devices, even though our goal always had been to design for Google Cardboard, so it was available to the average student rather than having to go to a small number of devices. We could see a lot more utility being able to go to any sort of device. So that then morphed into Dookie VR. So our 4D virtual farm moved into Dookie VR. We changed our camera setups, and so we now have a much higher resolution image. And also looking at drone shots as well as ground-based shots and putting in a range of extra videos. So standard two-dimensional videos into there rather than the 360s, but also doing some 360 videos as well into that. Over that sort of time, we have done some work in AR. So you can see an absolutely terrible poster I have there on the left-hand side, which is a backdrop there. And there's way too much happening on that poster, but each one of those panels that you can see in different colors is actually effectively a QR code to a video that plays. So if you hold your camera up to that, then it will, at the time through Orasma, it played a video that went with that, so a short 9-second video for each one of those segments talking about that project. So I guess we're looking at doing some more in augmented reality as well as virtual, and also looking at building out some things. So we have also scanned some sheep to build a complete 3D model of the sheep, which is still a work in progress. I guess some quick takeaway points, because I know I'm running out of time already probably, is some of the things we've found. We're starting off from where we wanted to get to, so identifying our desired learning outcomes. That then determines where we take our photos from, what sorts of photos we take. So even though we're taking full 360 degrees and you see everything, it's really important to work out what those learning outcomes you want the students to get. So where you take the photos from, what height the photo might be, all that kind of thing. So I guess beginning with the student in mind, which is probably nothing particularly tricky to think about, but it does take a bit of time to develop that. Working out an optimal dollars versus time technology. So sometimes it's better to spend more money up front, because otherwise you spend a lot more time and labor. And thinking about that both from a hardware and software point of view, we've had to regularly change what we're doing as platforms change. So I think really important to talk to people already producing content rather than some of the sales pitches, which are can be challenging. And look, being prepared to change things as you go through, because there's every 6 months there's the next version, something comes out. Sometimes there's no big difference, and sometimes it's quite game changing. I really strongly recommend keeping students and staff within your feedback loop, so you keep getting feedback to improve and adjust as you go. So that's been really important for us. And as much as possible, try and keep your platform independent. So if you rely on one platform, for example, that poster I showed used Orasma. I think about 2 months after that was produced, Orasma was no longer. And so thinking about how you'll cope with that change over time when you get platforms change, because there is a constant churn in those sorts of things. So again, F40 Farms is our own site, so we don't have those problems. But that's a very quick 5-minute rundown of the last 10 years.
Awesome, thank you, Stuart, and some great insights there to pass on.
Yeah. Let me just
stop screen sharing. Going to hand over to Ben Loveridge now, who's probably the University of Melbourne guru.
Sorry,
well, I'll take that, but everyone's got their knowledge areas, and I have to say Stuart's knowledge of 360 cameras is second to none. He's definitely our go-to for all things 360 as well. So if you've got any questions about cameras, Stuart's definitely the man. So I'll do a bit of a run through about where things are at with VR in the uni from sort of an overview point of view. So I'm the coordinator of immersive media. So what is immersive media? Well, it's really however you define immersive. So it kind of encompasses everything. I see immersive as being a mental and a physical state. So immersive can be you feel like you're somewhere, but you can be immersed in a book as well. So it's a pretty loose term as far as I'm concerned. But my main role is really trying to integrate VR and 3D technologies into teaching and learning and research and engagement, basically everything, because it's all the same thing. I see things not as separate, but as integrated. We have a VR lab that is currently a bit closed, like many of them, because headsets and COVID are tricky to navigate. Even though things are relatively good here, we just don't want to run the risk of any issues. So we're working remotely with VR type activities, but we're focusing more on 3D as well. So we've got a website here, which I will put into the chat, where you can find out more about what we do in the lab and some of the projects. We've worked with lots of different areas, 3D artists, doing virtual production, so mixed reality. I'm from based in the video team, so integrating all of the mediums together, I think is a really important thing to do. VR doesn't kind of operate separately. It's important to really utilize it in conjunction with the other things as well. We've worked on a number of projects around the uni. One was using VR in youth mental health. So we built a prototype which placed a person into an area where negative thoughts would come by and they could choose to pop the balloons or not. So testing out prototypes with things that are hard to do in real life, but you can do in VR is a really good way to look at the medium. We've also helped integrate VR into the biology classroom. So this was taken, I think, 2016 or 17. And first year students are getting a virtual tour through a cell in a VR app. And students loved it. They found it engaging. They were like, why can't everything be in VR? Because it's so visual. Unfortunately, it's very expensive and challenging to scale up. One of the recent initiatives that we're really excited about is the University of Melbourne's 3D gallery. So where do you put 3D objects that you scan and create? Up until now, Sketchfab, but Sketchfab's a commercial product and it's not really institutional friendly to the degree that we'd want it to. So we now have an application called Pedestal, which is not enterprise yet. We're hoping it will be. At the moment, architecture have got a license, and also dentistry will come on board soon. So anyone who's working with 3D objects, definitely happy to keep chatting about this, because we want to be able to let staff and students log in, download 3D objects that the uni's got and use them in building 3D and VR worlds. How good would that be? Hubs, in terms of building 3D worlds, Mozilla Hubs is a really good way to actually start that process. It's free. You can build your own worlds. It's got networking inbuilt. So if you're wanting to do 2D, 3D, VR, Mozilla Hubs is a good place to start. This is a university 3D gallery that we built last year for a conference. So we were able to import 3D models into a gallery space. It was put together in less than a day, and you're able to kind of virtually tour an area, which is actually, in this current climate, quite an important thing to do. So it'd be good to actually focus on doing something like this at the uni as well. 3D models, it's a whole nother world of formats and standards. Good thing with standards is that there's so many to choose from, but learning it is a challenge. Another area that my main focus in terms of the research has been with music therapy and networked music and VR. So working with music therapists to help spinal cord injury patients sing online. VR is quite useful for that, to help people feel like they're somewhere else and not being scared about singing in front of other people. VR can be useful for conferences. It can be overkill sometimes. So you got to really choose how you use the technology. Don't just use it because it's cool. Unfortunately, that happens a lot, but there's still some really good things with that too. And yeah, just finally, I'm currently focused, I'm doing a master's in music, but focused on can singing in virtual reality be better than video conferencing? And Mitch has sort of been helped out with that so far, and it's been a really fun project to work on. So yeah, happy to answer any questions via my contacts there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Wide portfolio of projects there. So next we've got Charles. So hand over to Charles now.
Thanks, Tom. What's my last name? We'll work on it. I have to admit that my colleagues' professionalism has caught me off guard here with their fancy presentation, so I've dusted one off that I had here. My name is Charles Seveny. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Physiology, and I'm also the Director of Digital Learning for the School of Biomedical Sciences, which means that we run an organization called the Digital Learning Hub, together with my colleagues Jairus Bown and Keenan Hellier. And I guess just to give you a little bit of background on how this came about 3 or 4 years ago, Jairus and I were doing a lot of animations. Jairus is an animator, a very good one. And we started building this animated heart that we were going to deploy just on a flat screen type device for people to use. And then ultimately we got to the point, we got a little bit of money in our pocket, and I said, well, you know what I really want to do is reach out and grab that heart and be able to explore it. So we got a few VR headsets, and then started what we called the Virtual Reality Learning Studio in the Department of Physiology. And that grew very, very quickly and took off. And then the School of Biomedical Sciences that physiology is a part of said, well, that's shiny, we want it. So then we expanded into the Digital Learning Hub, which became a lot bigger than we ever wanted anything ever to be. And this is what our brains were like for a while. But just to give you a very, very brief overview of it, digital learning ecosystem, if you If you Google that, you'll get the phone book, Half the Internet. But we put together sort of different priority areas that we wanted to focus on. And one of those was still VR. And a lot of that was having that infrastructure, physical infrastructure for students to engage with, whether that's virtual reality, augmented reality, et cetera. But also we were very keen on making sure that we're supporting people's digital literacy, engaging with the learning community, making sure that we aren't just using tech for tech's sake, and also developing our own content, so much like that VR heart that we built. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But really, all of these things that we've always done and everything that I've always tried to do has been underpinned by this idea of students being part of their learning, being immersed not only in what they're learning, but feeling like they're part of their learning community. So we've always really tried to have a focus on that, getting students to develop their own content, et cetera. We have a lot of development projects. We're currently working on the VR human heart with our colleague Michelle Rank. We're building a VR knee and knee exam for physiotherapy and anatomy in general. A whole bunch of different things that we've been working on. And I'll talk about Roslyn a lot more tomorrow at the workshop, but I'll touch on it a little bit today. So this is just an overview of the VR heart. We developed it locally. It's clinically accurate. We worked with cardiologists from RMH. And once we have this model, we were able to start building a lot of different modules just using that model and building around it. And just to show you, this is Jairus's world about what we've had to go through to actually develop this thing in 3D. He uses Blender. I don't understand what any of this is. I just wanted you to know that it's hard. And this is Keenan's world in Unity, where he takes the model and actually builds it into the program itself so you can interact with it. But that's not all we've done. So Mitch will know some of these. We've worked with ancient Egyptian studies with Brent Davis. Is that I just drew a blank with Brent Davis and Mitch. There's a fantastic VR tomb, the Tomb of Nefertari. And I remember when we first got these students in, Jairus and I looked at the program and we said to Brent, we said, well, that's great for 5 minutes. What are they going to do for the rest of the hour? Do you want us to do another activity? And he said, these are third-year students. They'll be reading the walls. And indeed they were. They were in there reading the hieroglyphics off the walls. Brent was running around with his translation book. We had to pull them off of there and kick them out after about an hour and a half. So that was a really great experience for them. We do a lot with group work in VR. Here's a great little program called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, where one person in VR has a bomb they need to defuse and their friends have the manual for it and they've got to interact and communicate to do that. That's been a great tool. We worked with Richie's Plank experience to actually do an experiment where students expose themselves to this height challenge. So you go up 88 stories or something and the doors open and you're looking down and you've only got a plank to walk out on. I actually wasn't able to walk out on the plank for a very long time. It is much more terrifying than you think. And then we took students to Eureka Tower and saw if it had an impact on their height stress. And spoiler alert, it actually did. It was chalk and cheese. So the most important thing that we had to deal with was deploying things at scale. And I'm going to try to go through this very quickly. I don't want to hold you up too long. But a lot of people say that scalability is the drawback of VR. We were able to deploy our VR Heart program to 1,200 undergraduate students over the course of 2 weeks, simply by getting them to sign up to half-hour sessions. We had 16 headsets and we just moved them through. So we're able to do that, and I'm happy to tease that apart if anybody's more interested. But obviously that's changed a little bit since COVID, and we sort of have been working. These are just some students' perceptions. They loved that VR activity, so we did some surveys on them. They thought it was beneficial to their learning. They thought it was an authentic learning tool. They said it was very engaging, high scores for usability as well. So they really loved that. This is just a quick thing of this virtual knee that we're working on, and obviously this is a very early version, but the idea is to actually have physics built into this thing. And these are actual scanned bones from a cadaver. So we're making it very, very accurate with a 3D scanner. But you can sort of see the potential of students when they're doing a knee exam to be able to relate what's happening back to the anatomy itself. I just want to show you one more quick thing before we go and what we sort of did when COVID struck. And let's see if I can share this other screen just very, very quickly. Here we are. So we've been building this platform called Roslyn, which is for deploying online content. And like I said, I'll be touching on that a lot more tomorrow. But this is just an example. So in our VR Heart, we took it to flat screen devices so students can access it that way. They can play around with it. They can make it transparent. They can zoom in. They can slow it down to really see what's happening. And then there's a whole bunch of different modular elements they can go through to highlight different portions and learn about bits of the heart. And within Roslyn, we're also web VR enabling this as well. So students do have a headset. They're able to access it from home that way. But we actually have a VR activity coming up in semester 1 right now. We've got the SOPs written up so students can use VR back on campus. And that's another thing I'm more than happy to talk about if anybody has any questions, but I will leave it there for now.
Thank you,
Sorry
Charles.
for going on too long.
No, that was great. Thanks for that. And next up, we have Meredith.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tom, for inviting us to present. I'd like to just quickly begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we are on. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So I'm Meredith Hinds, Manager e-learning e-teaching from the Faculty of Arts, and I'm joined by my colleague Mitch Buzzer, who you'll hear from shortly and whose presentation is going to be a bit more visual than mine's going to be. And we're a small dynamic team of 4 supporting teaching staff to integrate technology in teaching and learning across a large number of very diverse disciplines in the humanities, social sciences and languages. And the team's constantly evolving new approaches to augmenting blended learning and supporting active learning. Since around 2016, we've been exploring different ways to enhance learning opportunities by creating and applying immersive technologies in VR and working very closely with our teaching staff around the duality of designing the experience to suit the learning content as well as the learning context. And we've sought to find discipline relevant approaches. Our Bachelor of Arts received a renewed focus on object-based learning with the redevelopment of the Arts West building in 2016. So that was really our departure point. So our early examples were really around that augmenting of object-based learning and visual analysis. And that also opened up opportunities for us to work collaboratively with other experts across the university. So we reached out in particular to Ben Loveridge, and one of the early collaborative projects we worked on was to enable arts academic Monique Webber to be immersed in virtual space and walking around, painting on a sculpture using Google Tilt Brush, and we created that into a video learning material for her Ancient World Studies students. I'll put a link into chat. That is a little video that explains that you can look at later on. Here we go. And some of the key considerations for us have really been around building strong collaborations with others working in immersive technologies across the university and thinking about how to get buy-in from our teaching staff. We've really looked for opportunities at each point to repurpose the assets that have been created and really trying to develop assets that meet several objectives. So perhaps that can be used in a marketing or research context as well. And 2 of our important examples from 2020 that Mitch is going to touch on actually initially started as research projects and have sort of morphed from there into teaching as well. It's very much been an incremental approach for us, working very closely with our teaching staff, showcasing examples, looking at ways we can expose teaching staff to ideas. One of our early examples, we filmed Shakespeare Taming of the Shrew. We filmed the same scene with the same actors in 3 different styles, and one of those included 360 video. And that provided students with original interpretations of scenes and the agency to look at any character they chose, rather than, director's fixed gaze. And students viewed the scene through class sets of Google Cardboards, and we really utilised the collaborative classrooms in Arts West and had lots of learning activities scaffolding that as well. And then in 2019, we teamed up with our external relations team within the faculty to do more 360 filming in the Ball Theatre in Old Arts using an Instapro 360 camera. We filmed a 360 of the assassination scene from Julius Caesar. And that was a departure from some of our other, or really our other approaches. That was a high quality production produced with a budget. It featured third year actors from the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music, and the subject coordinator directed the performance, so making modifications for 360. And that asset then was repurposed by our arts external relations team for a hackathon event that involved engaging future students. So I think year 10 to year 12 students. So it was also featured at open days as well. And we've just adapted as we've gone. Often we've had not much equipment at all to work with. So before we had a class set of headsets, we would design activities carefully around having a number of different experiential stations and working with smaller groups of students that would rotate during class between the different stations. And we made sure that we built into the activities both reflection on the content and the learning experience as well. So that was important to include that in there, both aspects in there. We've used a combination of medium quality production levels and DIY approaches, and that's been quite an intentional approach so that we're modelling something that students and staff can do themselves, and so that there's always that enabling of students to act on the material and develop content. And the sorts of application that we see in our disciplines in the humanities includes the students building interactive field trips or tours, digital storytelling presentations, and alternatives to traditional essay assessment. So importing 180-degree or 360-degree photos and adding series of hotspots that comprise of narrated voiceovers, videos, links, and text resources. So we've looked at it from the perspective of creating learning experiences and learning materials and opportunities to immerse students in environments, and also consideration of repurposing assets across several teaching modes. So face-to-face, in-class active learning, in-class incursions, virtual field trips. We one year did a virtual archaeology field trip, which is quite interesting. A blended mode where we're using material in class or outside of class and embedding what we can within the LMS, and then fully online where we've had virtual tours exploring places and spaces. I'm not a very technical person. I'm kind of across the whole team. So Mitch is going to talk at a more technical level, but one of the projects that I was working on was the online version of a French subject in the heart of the Loire Valley. And that's a language and cultural history subject. And we used SeekBeak, which Tom has got on a program for, I think, tomorrow or the day after. And SeekBeak's a very, very easy to use, drag and drop type program. And we used photos that the teaching staff had actually collated themselves, and we built these virtual self-paced tours and site visits of 6 castles in the Loire Valley, because obviously last year the students were meant to go and have the subject in situ and they couldn't. So we've got these 6 site tours that students can work through at their own pace. And so they're embedded in Canvas with asynchronous activities. I'm just going to put in chat an example of just a very, very simple one. And of course, we had to work with what we had that the teaching staff had collated. So I'm going to now hand over to Mitch.
Hey, everyone. Let me share my screen. I also haven't got a presentation, but I did pull together some screenshots just to kind of give some visuals to what we're looking at. View full screen mode. There we go. So just to kind of bounce off what Meredith was saying, something Thomas said yesterday rang a bell with me, and just to kind of paraphrase what you were saying, Thomas, it's time to stop reinventing the wheel and begin applying pedagogy to intelligently create XR experiences for education. And it's funny, because when you said that, I had just been thinking about the same thing. I've been looking at some of the Sundance stuff and wondering how would it fit in with some of the screen studies program, and wondering who to, who to recommend it to, and maybe how would they even see it, et cetera, et cetera. But really, that's just kind of, answering the question the wrong way around. But the point I wanted to make was that, we've got such a lot of, we've got about 50 different subject codes in the arts faculty. And that means a lot of staff and, so many different ideas and so many different ways in, that really all of our projects have begun as this kind of prototyping, hairy experiments. And that's where they begin, just with people saying, oh, I saw that you're doing some things with one of my other colleagues, and it starts with a conversation like that. And so I think both things can coexist. You can have a really focused production method, but you can also encourage everyone to just begin experimenting and fiddling around and see what they come up with. And then hopefully some of them will become good working prototypes that they can put into their, straight into their teaching practice. That's what we're trying to encourage anyway. So we've used heaps of different online web tools. This one's called Via, which everyone's probably seen. And I'm just going to sort of flip through here just to show you. These are various things that we've done. The one down the bottom here was for a creative writing program, and it was basically working with a bunch of students, creating some beautiful representations of planets in Google Tilt Brush and giving them a shot at making 3D models that way. Is digital literacy show and tell, which probably some of you attended from 2018. That was just a kind of me figuring out how does the software work. We have messed around with extracting elements, 360 and 3D elements from video games. In particular, the Assassin's Creed series, which is set in ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. Both the titles are set in both places. So there's a lot of visual material to work with and to draw from. Another interesting one that came up was just out of conversation, someone from our on-country learning program, which is a 30-year-old subject where students go up to Yorta Yorta country. Someone from that program, his name's Shane Charles, linked me up with someone from Department of Development, I think. I'm not sure what the department was called now, but the idea was to rework a iPod-based walking tour, or Wurundjeri Docklands tour. And again, just an experiment. And so a lot of our things kind of don't live past the experimental phase. This is a good example of it, where it never ever went past draft, and it was never going to be picked up. I think that impetus just went away, but it was a pretty good example of how the conversations can go all the way to outside of the university. There's another sort of more or less defunct platform called RoundMe, and we gave that a go as well. This is an example of, just going to finish up by showing you some examples of where through iteration, some of these ideas have actually gone to a more advanced level. So what you're looking at here is...
Sorry, Mitch, I don't think you're sharing what you think you're sharing here.
Ah, thanks. What am I sharing?
It looks like your bank account details.
What can you say? Sorry.
No, I've got your PDF here. Yeah.
All right. Hang on. Sorry. So...
Which does win the prize for the most unique surname, though, unlike James.
Did you
Sorry,
see
Mitch, I was trying to be the friend that tells you have something stuck in your teeth there. Nobody wanted to step up and do it.
Sorry. Did you see any of the images I just showed? No, sorry, none of them. Okay.
Just the icons.
Let me just see what I can get up there. 1 second. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, this is actually... Let me just recap then, because I just want to show you briefly. This is just an indication of, how many different projects and prototypes, and some of them have gone into VR incursions into classrooms and just straight up embedding into the LMS sites. What you're looking at here is an example of a section of the Manus Island Detention Centre, which has now been razed to the ground and is now back to a greenfields, returning to jungle. So this is a research project that we're involved in at the moment to recreate it from satellite imagery and from firsthand interviews with pretty well-known detainee Behrouz Bashani and a few other people who were guards there. So using some films and some satellite imagery, we've been able to kind of piece together the actual imagery of the buildings. And so the idea is to basically preserve what the facility looked like, because it has actually just been completely removed. And here's some of the, this is really just a phase 1 project at the moment. But it's a good example where, through iteration, we've been able to just build. Neither me nor my colleague Sam are 3D modelers, but we're just using SketchUp. We're just, feeling our way through it, and we produce something that's pretty substantial. This is only one section of the prison, and we'll finish that out over the next little while. And just to come back to what Charles was referring to before, the project we've got that goes alongside the Egyptian tomb is something called the Library of Egyptian Stele. Might just pump these up a bit, see if we can get them. So what you're looking at there is relics which are commemorative, kind of like gravestones was the best way to describe them, but they were never situated in graves. However, they're covered with hieroglyphics, and so they fit very nicely with that concept of learning how to read hieroglyphics. And so the idea is we created this as a kind of companion piece to the Tomb of Nefertari experience. The most interesting thing about this project is that the scope for the project, it's gone all the way to becoming a proper experience built in Unity. But the scope for it is that students can now, in the next phase of it, can become involved by creating their own steles in this really kind of simple open source method, so to speak. And so they can contribute to the Library of Egyptian Stele. And so that can be not only part of their current learning, but it means that they are contributing to the next crop of students coming through. Who is Nature is another example where it began with some conversation with an academic from the arts faculty who was going to Cuba. And I said to him, look, we just got this 360 camera. Why don't you just chuck it in your luggage and take some footage and see what happens? When he came back, he had mostly footage that was, fairly unusable, but there was some good stuff in there. And so we kind of worked it and reworked it. And in the end, we found a way to work it into what was a VR incursion into 2 different subjects. That's now iterated again, and it's become a collaborative project with Learning Environments and with other grant money that's been drawn into it. And I believe that it's actually not at the end stage yet, so it'll probably be developed even a little bit further than that as well. And sorry, I'm just getting a bit mixed up what I put here. Oh, so this is back to the Library of Egyptian Stele. So this is kind of a concept drawing. It'll be basically like walking through a museum where you'll see large graphics on the wall, but then in the foreground you can see there the actual stone tablets will be propped up against the walls, and they can be moved around, they can be inspected, they can be scaled up and scaled down, so the students can have a good chance to look at them from all different angles. All right, I'll stop there.
Cool, thank you, Mitch. So next up we have Alexis.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, thanks Mitch for that presentation. I need to remind myself to find out how to borrow a 3D camera from you get up there and take some pictures or videos. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, good. Right, I'm just gonna share my screen. This will stop I will stop your screen sharing, sorry. And slideshow should come up. Okay, so right, so thanks Thomas for inviting me, and very happy to be here. Today I'm gonna talk quite quickly about something that I've been working on for a handful of years, which is essentially called field friend. Let's get laser pointer out. Yeah. Which is Field Friend, an app for mobile learning in the field, that we've called it. The context of this really is the subject that I've been teaching since, 2013, since I joined the uni, essentially about natural environments, which teaches about the Earth's natural systems. And these have traditionally been rather large cohorts. And in and through the subject, what we've wanted to do has been for students who used to be from the Bachelor of used to be the Bachelor of Environments, now Bachelor of Design, and also Bachelor of Agriculture students, as well as other students in natural resource management, to have the skills to interpret natural landscapes. So we try and deliver, or at least get students to learn about, natural systems, the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere. And so one of the key activities of this subject has been fieldwork, in which because we can't send students, we can't bring students out on guided excursions, such large numbers, we've had to guide them through, or get them go out in small groups to do their own site visits. And so these are the range of different sites that we actually get students to go and have a look at, walk around, and actually examine different features of the landscape. And this is just a bit of a zoom in. And at one of these sites, for example, along the Maribyrnong River, what we try and get the students to do is to navigate to different parts of the landscape and think about how soil, vegetation, erosional, depositional processes occur in different parts of the landscape, and in essence, contrast them across the stops, and also try and apply the processes that they have learned about through tutorials and lectures, and also apply some of the skills that they've learned in practicals as well. So the main idea around this, of course, is through fieldwork, we want students to learn within, and also learn with the landscape on hand. Learning by traversing the landscape, learning by stopping and observing features in the landscape. Unfortunately, undergraduate students, first years, are quite novices at being able to break down components of a landscape, and also actually understand what are some of the features in the landscape that should be looking out for. So just in a discussion with a colleague from engineering, and on the same page, and saying that students are out in the field and they'll come back to say, well, I didn't really know what I was supposed to be looking for or looking at. So possibly wasted time there. So here's just a little bit of background in terms of mobile technology and smartphones, potential of that, knowing the capabilities of smartphones these days. And so what we've developed with learning environments has been an app called Field Friend, and essentially Field Friend enables us to enhance the fieldwork learning experience. So it isn't the type of virtual reality 3D objects that you've seen with the previous panelists, but it's more of a very XR, very light augmenting reality, for more immersive fieldwork, increased immersivity, so to speak. And so there's some sort of background before we actually send students out to the field. And they also do a desktop background research before they go out to the field. And this green part here is where Field Friend is actually trying to hit on, enhance the field experience, but also to scaffold their learning experiences when out. And this sort of just presents the entire context of the subject and the activities and the assessments. And so these are some of the basic functions or aspects that we wanted the app to have. So of course, it had to be location aware to bring students to the correct location. We could also deliver and also allow students to capture resources that they captured in the field. It had to be linked up to the network. And also what we wanted to do is to ensure that the pedagogy, I guess, in a way, would be in such a way that we got students to generate the content rather than delivering content to the students and doing so scaffolding. And so we looked at some of the design principles for mobile learning, and we got them from Harrington 09, and these are just some of the features. So I'm not really going to go through all of these, okay, but I can come back and give you the details if you like as well. But really, it's more like they could capture materials or resources from the field anytime, anywhere, but we could also deliver some levels of guidance as well. So we were looking primarily at some of the affordances we could realize from smartphone technology. Okay. So just want to jump into the actual FieldFriend app itself. So there is a web setup in which the instructor can set up various waypoints at which we want students to stop at and observe whatever features of the landscape. And we can pose just quiz questions. We can pose multiple choice questions. You can give them a picture for them to respond to. We can ask them to do a video, ask them to capture a video, all right, in response to a question or request or anything else, or photo. So that's the instructor setup view. This is the student view. Well, this is the old interface, but it's been improved slightly. So here are the various, this sort of sets out where they are in the landscape for the Merri Creek Trail, and that meant to go across the landscape and stop at particular stops and do various activities. Now, in terms of learner-generated content, they can also take any kinds of recordings of photo, video, or audio reflections in any part of the landscape. So here you can see an example of a photo that has been taken by a student at the Merri Creek, in which you can see some erosion that has occurred incising across two different rock types. And here's just a little example of, in the middle here, column, here's a little example of the tasks that instructors can set to get students to, say, for example, think about the geology of this landscape. So I think there was a text request, and then there's also a video response request. So they might have to do a video of themselves doing activity, or a video observing the flow of the creek, whatever. So this is the question. So what we wanted to do was to make something that was quite customizable. And in terms of the level of structure and scaffolding that instructors like ourselves wanted, and also secure. Oops, sorry. And so secure, and talk about security later on. But also having it on the smartphone enables them to use the apps in the phone as a bit of a Swiss knife, technological Swiss knife. So there are the apps that can be used, of course, to examine the environment. So soil mapping, for example, using the soil map app, or plant identification apps. They could sort of screenshot their results, that sort of thing, and then sort of integrate that into what they captured in FieldFriend. And post-trip, what you have when students capture or respond to questions, and when they link up to the uni wireless or through 4G or 5G these days, I guess they can upload everything in a secure manner that's stored on the university servers. And so, yeah, so it's sort of nice and secure in that it's within the university environment, so you don't have much of privacy concerns, and also organizing students into groups and allocating them to different sites is done quite easily by just working with the name list that you export from Canvas or previously Blackboard. So that's a really quick rundown. The app has been developed by the colleagues in the past, and of course supported by learning environments, as well as the LTI grants in 2014 and 2016. So we've got the app available on iOS and Android now. So we have actually been able to, I guess, experimentally roll it out to our students, all our students, for them to use when they go onto the sites. So yeah, just a bit of a plug for the app. Let's get onto the website there and have a look. User guides up there, and that you can even download the app to have a go as well. So my last slide here. So thanks for listening. And I always think that it's quite useful and stimulating to work with others. And so, maybe we can just build something together with you guys. And I really can see from the presentations by previous panelists, you can see that there's a lot of potential for integrating some of the other really high-end, like, virtual 3D virtual objects into field frame that is being used.
Awesome.
So,
thank you, Alexis. We'll have to hand over to our last panel member today, which is Todd, all the way from New Zealand. So over to you, Todd.
Well, tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Yes, so I'm hailing from across the ditch over in New Zealand. I'll just see if I can get the PowerPoint up. Like Charles, got a little bit caught off guard, just seeing that might have been the case that we'd have to do that. Are you able to see my PowerPoint from there?
No, we've still just got you, Todd.
Okay, let's go without it, eh? So yeah, as far as for a bit of background on me, so I've been teaching for 25 years, or been in healthcare for 25 years and teaching for 12. And on top of that, I've also got 5 learners in the house. So learning about different ways of doing things. From me, about to embark on PhD, my wife just finishing PhD, and then got children just trying to get through high school. So I guess like what I'm hearing from a lot of people is surely there's different ways of doing things, and being able to consider what technology enhanced learning could be for that. So and that was really the starting point, and thinking about how are we as tertiary educators adapting to the learning needs of people that are coming through, and for them to be active with their inquiry. Through discussions with Tom, just thinking about, well, what is the pedagogy behind that? And so I won't bore you with terms such as social constructivism and self-determination and situated learning, but I'm sure that they're all parts of even what I've seen today of what's been incorporated, and hearing people saying that they're trying to get the students to construct the environment. So using pedagogy, that trying to increase their engagement by that development, by helping them to develop their identity as a learner and in the different environments that they're in. So as I mentioned, my background is in healthcare, and Tom's said that Stephen, who as a paramedic has had to head off to an emergency, and that is a little bit of the world that we live in at the moment, as far as trying to embrace what we have for the here and now. and COVID definitely raised a few different things for us in little old New Zealand as to how we might be doing things. You know, on the back of that, though, I must say that I've just come off the back of a 3-day music festival with 5,000 other people. So that's where I'm very thankful for being in New Zealand. And it was nice, Meredith, to hear you also using SeatBeak, because that's been the platform that we've been using with our students. It has been more from an andragogical perspective, so being more teacher directed with that. A lot of our learning strategies would be more the paper case based, where we would get the students to look at a case and then start to explore it within the class. And we've just been starting to use SeatBeak to be able to help them to find information as well. Just see if we can get to that. Any chance that you can see the screen now?
Yeah, we can. Yep.
Excellent. So as far as with the different scenes that we've adapted and used, so rather than a case based on a concussion, so my background's in physiotherapy, that we start off in the scene, and Meredith will be familiar with the different hotspots. Hello, Mr. Glaser. And from that, they then pull together their clinical signs and symptoms to be able to work out, well, what's the next step? What's the next scene that I should be going to help inform me? Along with Stephen, who unfortunately can't be here, we've worked with an interprofessional handover. So that's where we have thought about a starting scene for physiotherapists as to what they need to think for concussion. And for our physios, they then have to think about how they then talk or communicate that to the paramedics and then to the nurses. So we've directed that learning up to this point. What we're looking at to next is really, as part of my PhD, would be to be informed by a systematic review in different focus groups to see how we could use some fairly basic headsets. So we're thinking about using the Merge, the Merge headsets here at AUT. Where the students design and create those different scenarios to demonstrate their understanding of learning. And like you, Alexis, being able to go out into the environment and collect those images, whether they be videos and or photos, and then share them with their peers so they too get that learning too. So that with the support of us as knowledgeable others, as well as their peers. And just recently at this North Campus, we're about to open a virtual learning space. So we're not as flash as what you have over in Melbourne. We've got a few Oculus around, but not enough that we could put out en masse to students. So we're using what we can to be able to help facilitate the needs for here and now in COVID, but also because of the reducing clinical placements that we have out and about. So thank you.
Thank you, Todd. And big thank you to all of our panel members, which it's been great to get a bit of an idea of some of the real breadth and of the different immersive reality projects. So we have pretty much gone over time, but is there any burning question from our participants that they would like to ask our illustrious panel before we get everyone to head off? And while I'm just throwing it out there, perhaps the panel could think about what is perhaps one key issue that they think is perhaps the biggest issue around immersive reality in education. Charles, looks like you want to.
Mitch beat me to it with the hand raise because I was actually going to ask him a question.
I wanted to contribute that I think biggest issue for how we work on campus. At some stage, we will get back to that as a kind of standard mode of being, you know, together. But the big issue that we need to or the big river we need to cross is this idea of a solo experience. So it seems like we're going to have, in the first instance, a kind of a solo together. You know, everyone's doing a solo thing, but together in the same room, and it's funny. It's weird, and it's kind of a big disconnect in the educational flow of things, I think. But solving that and working on that problem will be an interesting. Searching for a word here, but it'll be the innovation, I think, that takes things to the next level.
Yeah, I agree, Mitch, and I think that's one of the key
on
things. Yeah, I'll hand over to Charles to continue because he wants to.
No, look, you know, just thinking very broadly on this, Mitch, you're absolutely right, because we don't want VR to be a solitary experience. And the difference I see between VR and AR is that VR, you have the capacity to bring people from wherever they are into the same virtual space together. And I think that is something that, you know, we need to expand on a bit more, and Ben might be able to comment on that a little bit as well. And we worked a little bit on that with even with the human heart, because we had a collaboration with theater studies, and where we had people in different locations together using the Oculus Quest in the same virtual room. So some people in Melbourne and some people out in some town I can't pronounce, getting together in the same virtual space, and they were handing each other the heart and all of this sort of thing. And I think there's a lot that can be done with that in VR. I think when we get students in the same room, though, unless you need to put them in an environment like the Tomb, I think that's where AR comes in, because now you can actually have a social interaction with the other students in the room, interacting with that object, like Meredith was talking about earlier, that object-based learning. So I think there's going to be a place for AR in that space of this weird environment of having 16 students in a room all with a headset on doing an individual activity rather than bringing them together.
Charles, one of the interesting things I've seen recently is computer vision from, say, Oculus Quest headsets into really, authentic and kind of perspective, with correct perspective. Sorry, I'll start that sentence again. Making the pass-through video from Oculus Quest headsets really high quality and with correct perspective. So the concept would be, instead of having AR glasses that you're looking through with your eyes, you simply use the video cameras to, you know, recreate your eyes, and therefore you can walk around without bumping into people, but you can kind of, you can then imagine this fluid space where it's half the real room that you're in and half a virtual world that you're in. And then, I mean, that's a mind-blowing idea, being able to kind of really seamlessly walk into other people's virtual spaces across the internet. And I think that's got a big impact for education.
I think one of the problems with that, we've considered that a little bit. I think one of the issues is actually the latency of those pass-through cameras. And I think you might need to bring a bucket, because it'll make people pretty sick pretty quick. But I agree with you. If they can get that problem sorted out and actually increase the fidelity of those pass-throughs, that could solve the issue. Yeah. The other issue I have with the Quest is that you can't actually see the student's screen. You know, with a Rift, it's plugged into a computer and you can walk by the monitor, and if they're struggling with something, you can see what they see and help them out. And with the Quest, it doesn't have that ability built into it.
Although the casting feature has been really simplified and improved in the last update.
Well, ideally what we'd like to build is, you know, an app for an iPad where an instructor can walk around and just swipe through all the screens and see what's happening, and that shouldn't be too difficult. But,
yeah, and when you do a few VR experiments like that, that becomes very important. You've got to have that feedback loop between the instructor and the student to make it really an authentic learning environment.
Yeah. And that's what would be nice, like what Mitch was saying about actually putting the instructor in the same virtual space, and all the students and the instructor, for example, are all in that tomb together through avatars and can actually interact within the virtual space, rather than that sort of immersion breaking, talking over your shoulder.
just a note that I think we're probably going to see more happening in the 2D space in terms of innovation and things that you can scale more than, say, VR and headsets, which are still quite niche to kind of expand out. So I'm already seeing a lot of companies building 3D platforms, but for a desktop computer or a mobile computer, audio only rooms, things that you can have billions of people access. We're probably going to see more in that space, and I think that's probably, it's lower hanging fruit, but it's I think where a bit of activity will be. So you kind of need to keep an eye on what can you implement tomorrow, while also looking at what's 20 years away. You kind of do have to be across both, but you have to be aware that you're not going to be able to do that really far-reaching stuff easily as well.
I think that's a big key, Ben, is really thinking about transferability and scalability. And as you say, if you scale back on the tech, then it is much more scalable as well. Accessibility, etc.
And I think for me, just to jump in at that point, because it's a good point. One of the things I think there'll be a lot more 360 images in terms of videos and photos. And so for someone starting out in that, I think the key thing is to work out whether you need both of those things in terms of videos and photos. And you're after one or the other. The best cameras for that job are actually quite different. So it's a matter of assessing what you want in terms of output, then looking at that difference. So and also your budget. I mean, if you have $8,000 to spend, then the Pro 2 is fantastic. But equally, you can get a very good camera for about $1,500, or even less than that too, depending on what you want. But knowing what sort of output you want does make a difference in terms of the hardware that you'll want for that purpose. Yeah,
and coming back to Todd with his point around student-generated content and Alexis as well, is the key tool there still is the smartphone. And what can you do with a smartphone and the camera on a smartphone? So, getting beyond delivery of content to making it actually much more user-generated too.
I think it's also about the students being comfortable with the technology. I mean, for us, we're looking at the clinical sciences, where we're looking to graduate nurses, not exactly media designers, but we're using VR, AR, or that 2D platform through the web, as you mentioned, Stuart, to be able to enhance their learning and be actively engaged with it. So being comfortable in terms of both the technology, but also that they're not going to be going out and, dare I say, breaking an $8,000 camera.
Well, that was a question I had earlier for Todd and Mitch about student-generated content, and obviously something I'm very interested in. But how do you engage with that learning curve for the students? Because again, that's, understanding how to use that tech isn't a learning outcome in the subject. And also, how do you manage the quality control of what they've actually produced?
So I think the key is really scaffolding it and looking at it as not just a one-off project, but something you start, in first year and you can build on. That's certainly a way to, I think, approach most technology-enhanced learning interventions, is look at it as a long-term scalable project.
Yeah, no, I think the confidence is also not only the students, but it's also the staff. It's all good if Todd's happy with the technology, but there needs to be others that can see the benefits from a pedagogical point of view, and that it's right for the content. And that's taken a little bit of development to this point, where it's been able to sell that and like these sorts of forums for people to be able to see that there's different ways of doing things and the values of it. So whether it's going from that teacher-led experience, but maybe of a blank canvas scene that they have to put the hot spots on, to then the next course that they do, they have to create the scene, and then the next one is how now does that translate to the learning outcomes, so that constructive alignment to then be assessed.
I think that's sorry.
Go, Alexis.
I think this part of the discussion really drives a bigger question on on and about assessment. How do we conceive of assessment in the first place? I think that there needs to be a huge shift from what we see as acceptable traditional assessment to thinking about new ways in which we actually can assess, or thinking about what is actually evidence of students learning. You know, if we can sort of turn it on its head and say that, well, a student-generated artifact resource is something that demonstrates deeper learning than what you can actually assess from a traditional test or exam, and get it recognized by the organization at large. That will be a big step, towards sort of really changing and also enhancing what we're trying to do here through VR, AR kind of work.
Definitely, Alexis. It's that development of metacognitive skills and digital literacies beyond just the subject content. I think it's part of the key there.
Yeah, another point I'd like to make, sorry, is actually, I just want to share this with you. This is something that, you see the Fortnite video playing?
Yes.
Yeah. So, this is something that my son is really into. And, it's really social because they're working as a group, as a team to, well, no doubt kill other people online, but gets me worrying at times, but there's no bloodshed per se. But I guess the idea is that, sort of linking to what Ben has said, can we actually sort of work with 2D like environments which have that pseudo 3D immersiveness. Technology is already available. What do you call them, 3D machines or whatever, are already there. The environment's already there. Can we actually modify them to suit our specific instruction needs? So can we just harness that is already available and try and start to modify them for us to use? So you can have these little team-based adventures that are time-bound and achievement-bound, with points or scores, that sort of thing, and they're having fun even though they're far apart from one another, and also keep that sort of sense of friendships, even though my son and his friends were far apart, but they had a lot of fun together during homeschooling time.
Yeah, good point, Alexis. I think if we're focusing on the learning outcomes, and some of the learning outcomes are building teamwork, collaboration, and being part of a team, then how you go about that is, can be a lot more authentic in various ways than writing an essay or an exam. So, hey, well, thank you, everyone. Don't want to keep people. We've had a really interesting start of a discussion, which we can go on for hours, I'm sure. And there's a whole lot of really interesting, offshoots and parallel things that we can talk about. But I think it's a great way to start, a great way to get people thinking, and hopefully a great way to start collaborating as well. So the next 2 days of the boot camp is 2 2-hour workshops where we're going to explore 3 different technologies, relatively simple technologies, over each of the 2 days. So we'll end up looking at 6 different technologies, including our homegrown by Charles and his team, Roslyn, which will be, I think we've got that scheduled for tomorrow. So it'd be great to have everyone who can make it come along and have a bit of a play and try out some technologies at a relatively low sort of technique sort of a level. So thank you all. Thank you to my illustrious panel. It's been great to have you. And we'll make this recording available for people who couldn't make it today. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye. Thanks, Tom.
See you all.
Thanks, Tom.